it Shanghai or Shanghai?
Without typing any phonetic into there.
Hold on.
Clearly it's Shanghai. Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Is that like one of the
help us out here.
It would be funny if it was.
This is a beautiful intro.
Right?
It's half the video.
Shanghai.
Oh, I still don't believe it.
It was like in between the two.
It sounded like they just used like an app or something.
Or a robot.
The following pronunciation is brought to you by pronouncenames.com.
Good.
Seems legit.
Shanghai.
Ah, it's Shanghai. Confirmed.
It still sounds familiar.
And it's also Shanghai, right?
We're not going to be saying manga either. We have to make
Shanghai.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't care. It's technically manga, but like, I mean, that's the whole point of it. Like, you don't have to make words right, you know? Like, they don't know which one it is. It's same as manga, but like, they can't say lemonade, so like, why should I have to say all their words right? You know?
Austin, do you usually leave black bars on the left side, right side of the screen?
Yeah, it's usually on the left, but
they say lemonade.
On the left?
Yeah, you can do whatever you want.
It's a whole different thing now. It's a different drink.
Like that?
You can change what the drink means.
I usually have all the info. Like,
Okay.
just kind of a list.
Okay.
Hey,
it's good to see you. Soft drink brand, so you have whatever flavor.
It's like a
So you have like
awesome.
You have like
It's like the
mango lemonade.
What's it kind of like what you see in the tigers?
Oh,
you go to the tigers, you see the green logos.
Yeah, they're cool. What is it?
Do you know what the IGDA logo is supposed to be? Maybe I should be asking this on stream.
This.
Yeah, do you know what that is? It's like a top, spinning top or...
I never thought about it, to be real.
It's great. That's like nobody does any kind of sauce. There's a salsa.
Yeah,
like
in Spanish.
Yeah, it's like
If it's in Spanish.
It's like not what it's supposed anymore. That's not all perfect. It's just clear. Like we weird things specifically say like the chunky with like the tomatoes and peppers and we have like a word for that.
What really matters is that it's mostly raw, if not.
Yeah.
Who's new? Is anyone new? Who's new?
I'm me.
You're new?
I'm kind of
You're new?
I've
seen you.
Steven?
Yeah.
It's been a while. I've had a bunch of stuff happen.
Oh, yeah. What's going on?
I'm just going to different events and whatever. I was at
Okay.
PAX.
Wrong.
Are you headed to PAX West?
I'm submitting to it. I'll see if I make it into it. Because I was in the mega booth, so I'm going to try to do the mega booth again.
Yes. Well, what's the name of your game again?
What? Wave Crash?
Wave Crash, yes.
Technically mini booth, but
yeah, that's awesome.
very cool. First PAX, it was big. I was like kind of overwhelmed. I don't know. It's a lot of people.
Did you get lots of good feedback?
Pretty good feedback, yeah. Got a couple of write-ups and a few smaller blogs or whatever, so that's cool.
Fantastic.
And it's just fun to present. I just like getting the game. Like, if I just do my job, have someone else make the game, and I just like go to place and stuff. Right.
That's like the biz dev.
I'm all over this. I can't remember what I usually have on the stream.
So you're going back to previous stream? Oh, that's what I do. Where's that at?
What'smyfont.com. What did I do last time?
And now we know why Bosky wasn't in it, so. Bosky.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah.
That stuff, man. Yeah, and then all the haters come out or whatever. It's like, this is what you get for saying mean things about other games, but it's not what it's about. What are you talking about?
It's supposed to be right here in downtown.
Get some Mario Kart going on. Hello. It's good to see you.
The new one was actually fun.
Yeah.
How things have started?
Yeah. It was very good. It was like, it was like every game felt so bad. This one actually was amazing. It wasn't like, oh yeah, we're just going to have extra stages and I wasn't really involved in that, so. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Spend a lot of time making one game.
I'm all
at the same time.
Even before K-Rap, I don't know. Doesn't really see a line when I would do that once.
Yeah, because it's like taking self-separate here, but now they have like the same kind of page.
Yeah,
like a
yeah, so it's like
I think someone watched
It looks so wrong when you stare at it for more than a few
Yeah.
seconds. Like I'm staring at it, I'm like, that's wrong.
Yeah,
Yeah,
great. And this was like, no, you're gonna be swinging around.
Yeah,
GDEX.
Thank you.
That's the
So like the whole building's blocked off.
Which is cool.
The most big shooters now are work early though. They just look at like,
Well, I think it's just between
Star Wars Battlefront where you just like zoom around and like,
yeah.
you know, you don't need to be like, like
over there for
Yes.
Okay. That's usually the fun
I don't have
part.
ideas.
Yeah. I've never had an issue there.
I think they are.
Now that you said something.
There's a one. Probably back to something new.
Look, it was closed over Christmas. I am off my game, dude. So I will be at every event
Yeah, a little bit. Which I'm always very
which I think she told me. Like saying that he's going to China.
You're always on time, right? Nobody will open up.
There's a when that world is that like it's the most inhospitable world that you can possibly get. The razor, you know, like sometimes just like shards of glass rain from the sky. Like that's why all the dudes are like 6 feet wide, because that's all you survive in that universe. You have to like take freaking razor and get out. I'm good. Yeah, everyone's fast. Oh yeah, no. They're the normal size because they wear helmets. You don't wear helmets. That's like the rule. If you can't see your face,
Okay.
then
I've got 5 seconds, so we'll see.
They didn't wear helmets. That's why I didn't kill them. It's like, what?
Yeah, if you end up needing any help with it, who's your teacher? Oh, I can't save you. I was gonna say anybody else I can save you, and then you said.
I'd probably be a little, if I wasn't there, but I was learning, so.
Yeah. I don't know what you're learning either, which is why I can't save you. I don't know what you're learning either, so I can't save you.
Yeah, me too. So I'll just plug in here.
Yes.
The setup right now is a little bit hard, so just be careful when you walk through. Corbin, were you able to find any tape to...
I have been setting this up. I don't know if I found any tape. Is Joe here?
Do you have anything heavy you can just lay over?
Is Joe here?
No, Joe is out.
He's out today?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you probably just something like that. Yeah, it's pretty much. I think I'm like, I mean, one of the things that you were actually there.
Okay.
The access was really good.
Oh, now my HDMI is on the opposite side of my computer, but that's not an issue.
Yeah, these cords,
Yeah.
and we know we can grab your rotating.
Yeah, that's good. That works. Let's do that.
You got your audio here. You need audio?
Yes.
Hard-based roguelike, so like you enter down to like a crowd deck and you gain cards over time.
Oh, yeah.
So it's really good.
This is on this side, though.
Yeah, what's going on, like different ways of doing it. Pretty clear, satisfying. It's like early access, but it's pretty complete. Like, I think I just realized it, but it feels like it's patching every week.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I do have, I mean, I brought controllers and stuff, so I think I can do like 4 players. I didn't bring enough for future. I think they're like, some of these people.
That was my other game that I was playing. I'm going to get all the achievements eventually. So I'm pretty good.
So I have I do have like a demo.
Fantastic.
You guys don't have like a microphone.
That's just crazy.
That's okay. Yeah, it's fine. My voice is just weird. I will.
So, while you're working, test that?
Yeah.
I like how like has so few.
Awesome.
Like, it's not a whole lot.
If you've got like those ones, YouTube or something, throw them on.
Okay.
5 minutes or so.
Oh, okay.
We'll get started this out.
Sounds good.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's not. It's more like this than.
Yeah, exactly. Because like they could have just been like, yeah, we're gonna have like a million different robots, like randomized numbers, and it's like, no, you do like 2 damage. You do 3 damage. So much more damage. I'm like, yeah, like.
It's you can keep track of it and.
Yeah, you actually know like your village and how to do it.
It's not. And how she watched. What was that?
Actually, like in Barnes Noble, they sell
Another like figurine,
X
it's
house.
like
oh,
Yeah,
and
that Overwatch.
I like
that saying
the
why don't you
too many times I've like one translated
My
now.
girlfriend keeps buying every time we go. She keeps buying.
Like an 85% chance of
Sushi. They're all over the house.
It crits. Person next to them panics because they die. Oh gosh. Because of like one.
not making
Hmm?
not making it.
Yeah.
But you're so constantly changing. How's it going?
Oh, yeah.
You're just like.
Like I love so much about if I could do it.
Didn't we just test it and it was fine?
Congrats on the lecture.
You sent me your trailer on Discord, right?
Yes.
Awesome. I could not remember.
And I filmed the next train. It's not fun to do.
See, that's kind of like you a lot of these robots. That's kind of it's nice to have track of and then it's not and also start befriending not trying to put it.
I'm just gonna eat awkwardly in front of you.
Like the difference like your mind. Pictures of my golden egg.
Someone's bottle claimed it as well. Wasn't me.
I saw you sitting there first.
I was. But then this bottle showed up.
Yeah, the bottle cost.
The bottle, yeah, exactly. The bottle cost did me. And, you know, I wasn't there. I remember that when that was so
Bottle's pretty important.
Now, the thing about the bottle is it doesn't need to see because it has a perfectly formed seating self. Like, as a human, we're not as good at just sitting on the floor. It's a little awkward. But like that, you know, the bottle. Now, if this were a cup holder, I would guess it really this much leverage. Or perhaps just the table. I don't think. Perfectly good chairs right next to that table. So that people sit slightly closer to where they want to be. So I'm just gonna stop
You go live.
that are just cool. They're just tiny vegetable things.
Words like
If that works.
It does.
More efforts, it's almost like
And then like Dan, I think incorporating some of the features that get developed into your process.
I messed up. Yeah, you did.
It'll be back like a week.
Well, I'll be back by GDEX.
Actually has some checkpoints.
What's up, Lance? I know. You'd think I would have done it before streamers. They work on it. It's a pretty good thing. There's always a little bit lighter because all the students are yes. Restream.io. And it says it's working just fine. So,
we were outside. We were outside and no one was here.
Yeah, I did it during the
Oh, yeah, you did. Oh, well, I was like, just in case you just never got.
Yeah.
Normally I don't.
Would I do it again?
Due to traffic, sometimes that's fine for a lot of time. But like, Zita's like, I'll try to beat traffic this time. Like, kind of hour early. I was like, my plan backfired.
It's like the best part of Marty John's series.
Right, I finished Japanese first.
Yeah. I think they're really good with the so like, they probably were. So they just had no idea that they're taking
Yeah, I forgot.
almost forgot what it's like.
Yeah, because it's
I only remember.
outside is so violent and
I graduated in December.
right, yeah. It's kind of
Yeah, I haven't been working that long.
I've just been working on like, see like switch. One of the things I'm working on is
Right. Yeah, but the recruiting was like a little bit of stuff.
People play that, but I've never played that.
It's still like a
Arbor. I like the Arbor, just the Arbor. That's the whole What was that?
so it's like kind of like extra like
Awesome.
It's kind of also
I'm not sure this is like
Alright.
I didn't make sure it worked first.
I know, yeah.
There's two over on my phone.
You're right.
What are you taking for your last semester? You got easy classes lined up?
What is that?
Most of my job and I still wouldn't think
When I created the word where you working? This company.
I would get
They did register the LLC.
they're a automotive supplier.
So they make, basically if you like rip up pretty much any Japanese car, essentially, they make everything. I work in safety systems and
They're called fronts.
so basically,
Hey, Brett, are you going to be walking around a lot or staying there?
we're working on
Very
software
We're
applications that help us collect data in the United States so that they can modify the stuff they develop in Japan to work here. Because the terrain is very different. And so is Japanese.
Oh, great.
So like our biggest customer is Toyota.
We're on YouTube and Twitch.
Sweet.
I know.
What about
Not yet. Next is Facebook Live, you know?
Facebook Live, Mixer. What's the Japanese streaming service?
Oh my gosh.
That was pretty big. Driving stuff in there first.
I don't know. You know what? Nick? Just saying that. Start singing the song.
Oh, you actually get the
whole album. Yeah, I get to drive these cars. Yeah, most of them are pretty quick. They have a really small team.
The alternative to working, literally
only 4 people on that team.
Okay. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen. All right, thank you for coming to this May meetup of the IGDA Ann Arbor. It's fantastic to have you here. Who's new? Anyone new? All right, Andrew, what's your name and what do you do?
Well, my name's Andrew. I'm a senior at U of M, and I was part of actually Austin's class, Austin's game dev class a few semesters ago. And yeah, I just saw the opportunity to come here, and it seemed like really cool. So I just wanted to get to know everyone here. So.
Excellent, welcome. Anyone else? All right, yep, give them a clap. Okay, we have 2 fantastic guest lectures here with us today. We have Brett Pennings of Bowlcut Studios, and we have Isaac Sweet from Dreaming Door as well. So a few announcements before we get into our first lecture of the night. We have a fantastic meetup that's going to happen next month. And Marshall, would you like to talk about that? Where are you?
Yeah, so
Yes.
Unity is coming. Great. So they have a evangelist talking about some of the new features and tools within the latest build for Unity. So that's going to be at Lawrence Tech's campus. I'll post some information, the link to the event on the meetup page if you guys haven't seen it. Has anybody not seen it?
Yeah.
Then you know all about it.
Yep, so it should be a fantastic event at LTU. And in fact, we're actually looking to do more stuff at LTU more often. Right, Marshall?
I'll make announcements.
Okay, so we'll talk about that a little bit later, all right? So, okay, I believe that's just about it. 494jobs.com has a bunch of game dev openings. Just got an opening from the Mortal Kombat team. Dan Howery, U of M alum down in Chicago, working on a Mortal Kombat mobile. They're looking for junior developers. Spellbound, I believe, is still looking for developers. Virtual repetitions. This is all on the event page as well. So just go down to the bottom, beyond the description. Lots of cool opportunities there that you can look into if you want to. Okay, so first up, Brett Pennings, the creator of MageQuit and founder of Bowlcut Studios. Who's played MageQuit? Anyone? So what a fantastic, cool game. And in particular, one unique thing, I believe 8 players local?
10.
10 players local. So a really, really cool experience. Won Best of Show at Expos.
GDEX.
Yep, GDEX. The Midwestern version of GDC, right?
Sort of, yeah.
Kind of?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, and Brett Pennings is going to talk about his company and game design as well, and MageQuit. So Brett, thank you.
All right, thanks. Can you guys hear me in the way back? I'd like to thank Mars and Austin for having me here. I've only been here once to see your presentation and didn't think I'd really be talking up here at any point. But here I am. So I'm going to be talking to you guys about the importance of game design. I'm going to start by explaining why video games are important, even though most of you probably already know why, or know that they are. Game design principles, some techniques, and then we'll go through a live iterative demo. And then we'll finish up by talking about drawing inspiration for your game. So first, hi, I'm Brett. I grew up in Kalamazoo, Michigan, but I live in Grand Rapids now. I went to Calvin College for electrical engineering, and then I worked in aerospace for 5 years, and then as a web developer for 4. So other than being confused about my profession, what qualifications do I have? So 4 years ago, I started working on a game with my brother called Feisty Fist. It was a kind of a goofy platformer. I don't know, I kind of always worked on games off and on growing up, and Chad, my brother Chad, the other half of Bowlcut Studios, he wanted to start making game graphics. So he made that goofy little guy in the corner, and I tried to teach him programming so he could make his own games, and he's not a programmer. So, so he started sending me art assets, and I started popping them into Unity and just messing around. As I worked on the game, here I'll show you a terrible video. As I started working on the game, I started reading books and watching talks on game design, and I got very interested in it. And as I got interested in it, I started realizing how terrible my game was. And so I'll get into more why we canceled it later, but yeah, we canceled it in 2016, and then we started working on MageQuit, which, as Austin said, is a wizard brawling game for up to 10 players local. We have online multiplayer too, but it's a bit buggy, as some of the streamers that have played it can tell you. But yeah, we've been to over a dozen conventions around the U.S. to promote it, and as Austin said, it won Best in Show at GDEX in 2017. So yeah, there's a picture of all the badges I've collected from all the cons I've been to. Why video games? I'm going to start by talking about words, pictures, and movies. So if you think about a book, think about the words that are in it. They're arranged in a single dimension, right? They're pretty much just indexed in the book, right? So you can agree that words are one-dimensional, right? Pictures are 2D. I don't think anyone's going to argue that point. People say picture is worth 1,000 words. That's a pretty common phrase, right? Okay. Take that one step further. You have a movie. I'm not talking about 3D gimmicky movies. I'm talking about a movie that's 2-dimensional, but then also has time as a dimension. So technically 3-dimensional, and a movie is worth 1,000 pictures. It literally is 1,000 pictures. I think you guys know where this is going. Video games, worth 1,000 movies, because you add not only time, but you also add interactivity. So this is why video games are the most powerful medium that we have available to us. And then as a bonus, Choose Your Own Adventure is 2D because you add interactivity. All right. So the fourth wall, that is the invisible wall between the actors and the stage. You guys probably already know that. This is the main difference between film and video games. So in film, that wall is pretty much always there. Sometimes they break it. If you've ever seen Deadpool and Wade turns and talks to the camera, for the first time it catches you off guard because you don't expect it. That's because you expect that fourth wall to be there. In video games, you don't have that fourth wall really at all, and you assimilate the character that is in your game. So the upside of this is that it opens up emotions that you would not have access to otherwise. This is especially kind of neat if you're dealing with a sociopath who doesn't have empathy, because they don't actually have to empathize with the characters in your movie if they're controlling the thing that is being destroyed. But yeah, and it also creates a more immersive experience. So you can create games that give feelings of guilt or pride, weakness or mastery based on how good or bad somebody is at your game. And then also rivalry and camaraderie if it's a multiplayer game. The downsides of a missing wall, you have no singular experience. When you're making a film, you know that you're showing everyone the same thing. They may interpret it different ways, but at the end of the day, they're seeing the same exact thing. With video games, you don't have that luxury. And also, they're less accessible. Videos, you can just put them up on YouTube and then anyone with internet can see it. With video games, let's say you put a game out on PlayStation 4 and it's an RPG. Only people with PS4 can play it. Only people that have bought your game can play it. Only people that like the genre that your game is can play it. And only people that are good at your game are actually going to enjoy it. So now you have a tiny subset, yes.
Also, they need to speak the language that the game is in.
On top of that, yep. I mean, that's probably true for videos as well, but.
Not always.
Okay. And then griefing.
RPGs make it more necessary.
Okay. So griefing for multiplayer games, you guys probably already know what that is. It's really hard to design against people that just want to be a pain in the ass, basically. Okay, let's talk about some game design principles. So if you ever read a book on game design, they always start it by defining what a game is, so you know what you're designing. I think it's a little corny, but I'm going to do it anyway. Theory of Fun by Raph Koster is one of the first game design books I read. And he says, games are easily digestible puzzles to solve. And he also says that fun is your brain's way of rewarding you for learning, which sounds like something Mars would say to his students. But the more you think about that, the more true that actually is. Yeah. All right. Any of you guys played Magica or Helldivers, anything like that? Okay, so the company that made those games, Arrowhead, their big quote that they have on their website is, a game for everyone is a game for no one. So you kind of, you're going to have to expect people to not like your game. Some people just aren't going to like it. And the game you're working on is probably something that you want to play. So I mean, that's good. You don't want to make something that you don't want to play. But you also need to kind of think about if anyone else is going to like it. And this is a whole topic in and of itself, so I'm not going to go into it. But all right, another book, Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman. This isn't really a game design book, but it's just about like all kinds of design. And he talks about the different types of thought that you need to consider when you're designing something. So you have reflective, behavioral, and visceral thought. Visceral thought is really more more of a feeling than a thought. And if you've ever played a game like Overwatch that just has a really good game feel to it, where it just feels good to move around in the game and interact with it, that's kind of more of a visceral thought. And then reflective is more like strategy games where you have to actually think about what you're going to do. I personally prefer reflective games, but then there's also behavioral games like Call of Duty, where you don't really do much thinking, you just kind of react to everything. It's a valid genre too. All right, another design book, Introduction to Game Design, Prototyping, and Development by Jeremy Gibson. He talks about the 4 different types of play, and he kind of talks about it from the perspective of like a kid. So I guess I'll start from the bottom. Mimicry would be a kid playing with action figures. Really, any game that you're playing that has a controllable character on the screen would be considered mimicry because you're assuming the identity of that character. Vertiginous play, that is like a kid on a roller coaster or spinning in a circle to make themselves dizzy. That's a type of play. It's not you're not thinking. There's no chance involved. You're just spinning. And that's not very common in video games, although I would say like the horror genre does an okay job of that, like jump scares and things like that would be considered vertiginous play. Yes?
Just a quick question, curious, who in here has met Jeremy? Anyone? Right? Yeah, so he's in the community, he comes to these every once in a while. If you see him in the crowd, definitely say hi. A fantastic person, a fantastic educator. He's at MSU teaching now. So,
I didn't know that, that's cool.
Yeah.
I'll have a lot to talk about with him if I meet him. All right, chance-based play. Gambling is the most obvious form of this. You got to be kind of careful when you're designing your game around this, though, because people like to complain about the random number generation in games. And then competitive play, so anything that's like sports or anything skill-based, anything like that, be considered competitive play. All right. If you're gonna pay attention to anything in this whole talk, it should be this slide right here. All right, mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics. Just knowing the difference between a mechanic and an aesthetic is hugely important when you're designing games. So mechanics are basically just how your game is programmed to work. Aesthetics are the pretty layer on top of your game, like the theme, the music, all that stuff. And then the dynamics are essentially how your players interact with the mechanics of your game. So as a player and maybe a first-time game designer, like I did, you approach a game from the aesthetics. So essentially, my brother gave me art, and then I dropped it, and I'm like, what can I do with it? Make a terrible game, that's what. So players will see the aesthetics first. Usually you want your aesthetics to hook potential buyers so that they'll purchase it. The aesthetics are going to be, aside from them watching like gameplay footage, aesthetics are going to be your most valuable thing for getting someone to buy your game. But it's not going to keep them playing your game if your game sucks. So yeah, as a player or a first-time game designer, you will approach a game from the aesthetic side. You'll describe what it looks like, or as a player playing a game, you'll see what it looks like, and then as you start interacting with it, you experience the dynamics of the game, and through the dynamics, you kind of discover what the game mechanics are. As a designer, you want to go the complete opposite way. You want to start by deciding what the core mechanic of your game is, what's going to make your game most fun, and then think about how players are going to interact with that, what kind of weird collisions are you going to end up with, like what's going to emerge from people playing your game. You got to think about that, and then think about how you're going to theme your game, all that other stuff. You might have a theme in mind, usually you do when you start a game. Try not to lean too heavily on the theme of your game when you're designing it, but at the same time also make it cohesive. And so this is the reason why we canceled Feisty Fist. All right, elemental tetrad, some more terms and stuff. So we already talked about mechanics and aesthetics. Those are two parts of this. There's also the technology and the story of your game. There's a whole debate around whether or not story has to exist in a game, whether or not a game that doesn't technically have story is still you creating your own narrative. I don't really want to talk about that. So we'll talk about the other stuff. So aesthetics, as we mentioned earlier, those are the most visible part of your game, and then you have your mechanics and your story, and then you have your technology on the bottom, which is the least visible, but the job of your technology is to be accessible. The more platforms you have your game on, more people can buy it, more people can play it. And the job of your mechanics, if you're making a fun game, I forgot to disclaimer this speech by saying this is about designing fun games, not like experiential or like teaching people lessons games. So anyway, the job of your mechanics is to be fun and keep people coming back to your game. And then aesthetics, aside from being like nice to look at, you want them to be coherent. If you have a pirate game, you don't want to suddenly have aliens in it unless it's about alien pirates. I don't know. Okay. Okay, let's talk about some techniques. Okay. How many of you guys know what flow is? I'm not talking about the progressive mascot. Okay, still. All right, so flow is the idea of keeping players suspended in a state between frustration and boredom. So if you've ever been doing something and then you check the time and you're like, oh, it's 3 a.m., I should go to bed. That's because you were in a state of flow, whatever you were doing. The best way to do this in a game, not the best way, but the easiest way to do this is to make your game multiplayer, which is what I did. You basically task the players playing to make it challenging for each other, which is, it's nice because you don't have to design a single player game that's challenging for everybody. But you can. Left 4 Dead kind of did this. They have a feedback system that detects how well you're doing. And if you're doing well, it throws more zombies at you. If you're not doing that well, it kind of backs off. So you always kind of are in a state of flow when you're playing it, even though it's not like a PvP game. Yes?
Yeah, I recall an interview. So Valve games are really cool in that I think once you beat them, you get a developer commentary mode, and you can play through the game, and in the game you see little speech bubble objects, and if you shoot them, you literally hear a development team member talking about that part of the game that you're currently in.
That's pretty cool.
And one of the things that one of the devs said was that like their optimal target, right? Their goal is to have the human players barely beat the level by the skin of their teeth.
Okay.
Because that just yields the most exciting finale, exciting experience. So that's what they targeted their AI at doing.
Okay. All right, and then skill gap reconciliation is the understanding that all of your players aren't going to be evenly skilled. So a traditional way of doing this is asking at the beginning of the game, are you actually good at this game? Do you want to play it on hard, medium, or easy? And that's pretty widely accepted. A lot of games do it. Then you have retroactive, which is like Angry Birds. A lot of mobile games will give you a number of stars at the end and say, you did this bad, are you okay with that? And you can say, all right, next level. And then multiplayer games like Mario Kart, you can use rubber banding, also known as negative feedback, which I'll get into later. But that's kind of like, if you're in last place, you get lightning and bullets and stars and stuff like that. And if you're in first place, you just get coins. And then cutscenes, which is literally showing someone a video so that they get the singular experience that comes from watching a video. And then also emergence prevention, which is kind of what I mentioned earlier, when the dynamics of your game sort of collide in unexpected ways. You don't want that to happen because you didn't expect it, and it can ruin the experience for other people. A good example of that in MageQuit was, actually I can give you two, and they both involve the boomerang spell. The first one was, the boomerang spell used to split into two when you hit somebody with it, but then there's also a vacuum spell which will pull projectiles into one person for 5 seconds. So if you threw the boomerang in there, it would split a whole ton of times, knock them way out of the lava, and then 20 boomerangs would come flying back in. The other one was boomerang and deflect. You throw a boomerang at somebody, they deflect it. Its target that it keeps trying to return to the person who casted it, but now it belongs to the person who deflected it. So it essentially would hunt that person down and kill him because it would just continue to hit them. So those are two examples of emergence that I didn't think of. I guess that's what emergence is. All right. Game design is an iterative process. This is kind of a good rule of thumb when you're coming up with a game and sort of refining it. Instead of getting carried away with the aesthetics of your game, you need to think about the very core mechanic of your game. So when I started with MageQuit, it was everybody's on this cube, everybody's a sphere, and you shoot spheres at each other. That's all it was. It looked really bad, but like the point of it is, is this actually fun with all the pretty stuff on top of it? Because once you start adding that layer on top of your game, you suddenly become less impartial as to whether or not it's fun, because you're getting an emotional response from the game that isn't necessarily coming from the mechanics. So you start with that, take a guess at what you think is good, implement it, test it out, figure out what was good, what wasn't good, what you can improve, or what you should just take out, and you just keep doing that until you have the best version of what you're trying to make. And then once you get to that point, start making it pretty. All right, so speaking of, so these are some early screenshots of MageQuit. There is actually earlier stuff that's worse than this somewhere, but this was the worst I could find last night. So this right here was the selection screen at the beginning, so you could join, like that represents a wizard that joined the game, and then you pick your element, which was whatever the particle effect is around it. So that's pretty bad. This right here, actually I'll just show you, it's a little video. Yeah, so we used to have the cooldowns all in the corners. The flashing is a Unity bug that they fixed, but we used to have all the cooldowns for all the spells in the corners, and then I realized from playing it that unless I was player one, I never knew where to look for my cooldowns. So we ended up, well, you'll see. And then over here is the spell drafting screen. If you're confused as to what it represents, that's because it's not good. I'm not even going to explain it. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so this is kind of what the game looks like now. This makes more sense as, okay, these are wizards. I can choose a team, I can set my name, blah, blah, blah. This is what the spell drafting screen looks like. It's a lot more straightforward. You know, it's this person's turn to pick. You know that, I mean, you can't really tell from here, but This is the spell you currently have highlighted, and this is the little video of what it looks like. And when you pick it, it goes here, and then the next person slides in. So I'll just play a track in case you guys haven't seen it before. Full screen? Full screen, is that an option?
Is it a YouTube video?
No. Oh shit. So that's what that looks like now. Okay, game feel, I'm going to talk about this very briefly. It's the largely intangible aspect of a game that makes it feel good to play. It's not really a very good definition, but it's because it's intangible, so it's hard to define. In a lot of cases, what people think of when they think of good game feel is really tight controls for the game, where you actually feel like it's sort of one-to-one with what you're doing. Like Mars's game, Axis was very snappy. So it's a good example of game feel. Bad game feel allows players to make excuses. So if you've ever played with someone who's not a very good sport and they start doing bad at a game, they'll blame the game. This game sucks. These controls are terrible, or even blame the controller itself. But when they're good at the game, it's because they're skilled. It's not because the game is good. But yeah, good game feel increases the immersion of your game. Win percentage. This is an important one. So Sid Meier says, no one complains about winning too much. Yes, that is true. But also, people do complain about a game being too easy. So you got to be careful about that. So if you're making a single player game, it's largely up to the designer how much they want the win percentage to be. If you're making a casual game, you pretty much, like if you think of like Angry Birds, it's pretty hard to lose at Angry Birds. But then you contrast that with like Dark Souls, and you have a very low win percentage, but that's the selling point of the game. Like they're like, this is on purpose, guys. It's not because our mechanics are bad. And then PvP games, let's say you have a 4-player PvP game, you have a 25% chance of winning. So if it's 4 people that are super competitive, 3 of them are going to be really upset, which is not necessarily a good thing when you want to retain a player base. We can contrast that with like PUBG, where you have a 1% chance of winning. But again, that's like Dark Souls, where that's the selling point, is that it's really difficult to win this. So you should try. Yeah, okay, so then you also have PvE, which is player versus environment. The nice thing about this is, again, you can sort of, it's up to the designer how easy they want to make it, but on the plus side there, if you all lose, you can commiserate with each other and complain about how the game sucks. And then 2-team PvP. These are super popular, I guess. Yeah, they're still pretty popular. MOBAs like League of Legends or Overwatch. These are all two-team player versus player games. And to me, this seems like the best. It's the best winning odds, right? While keeping the best version of flow, because you're pitting people against each other, which is why those games tend to be very popular. All right, let's talk about some game design techniques. Yes?
A real quick interjection. So Sid Meier was at U of M a year or 2 ago, and he gave a presentation kind of about that win percentage. And he talked about a really funny thing that apparently happens in Firaxis games, where you're right, no one complains when you're getting really lucky all the time. But if you start players they noticed started to feel like, hey, you know, maybe this isn't really, the percentages aren't right, or I'm being cheated somehow.
Yeah.
So what's actually in their games is that if you continuously get unlucky, they will show you the percentage, but actually give you one that is much higher. They will start fudging the game to make sure that
That's
you
really funny.
your string of bad luck does not continue too long. So just kind of a funny technique.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yes.
Okay. So some techniques here. We've got maximizing emotion. This is kind of basically identifying the points in your game that are the most enjoyable to players, and then kind of brainstorming how to make that more enjoyable. Usually it involves adding way too many aesthetics, like screen shake, chromatic aberration, a bunch of extra noise, just to make those moments feel better, and then also like time slow if you want to stretch it out a little bit. All right, positive feedback. So if any of you guys have played Overwatch, you know Genji's ultimate. He like pulls a sword out and starts slicing stuff up. If he gets a kill, his dash resets. That is an example of positive feedback, where you're rewarding the player for doing well by allowing them to do even better. A lot of times with positive feedback, it can make a game very imbalanced. And so you have to be kind of careful with it, but also can create moments in your game that are just absolutely ridiculous that keep people coming back. To contrast this, there's also negative feedback where you do the opposite. You kind of penalize players that are doing well as sort of a balancing technique. But you also have to be careful with this one, because if you do it too hard, then the game's boring. Like everyone's kind of just even all the time. But an example of this in my game is the draft screen, where you choose a new spell. It reorders the players based on who's winning. So if you're losing, you get to choose your next spell first, and then the person who's winning gets at most two choices for their spell. And that's to kind of balance the game out, to sort of keep things close. Information hiding. Any game you've ever played, like a card game that has a hand in it, that is considered information hiding. You're holding information that other people don't know about. In MageQuit, I use information hiding where you can apply a curve to your spell, but nobody knows what your curve is until your projectile starts going. So if you hold down one of the triggers while you're casting a spell, it'll curve it in that direction. So when you're playing a local game, you can still see their aimer. So you kind of know where they're going to aim, but you have no idea which way they're going to curve it. So you don't really know where you should walk to avoid it, which can add some like a level of anticipation to the game and some unknown. Risk reward. So giving players opportunities to take a risk in the game that could pay off big, or it could hurt them really badly. Here's an example of that in MageQuit. So the melee spells in the game, if you miss, you fall over for a few seconds. And the cooldowns on them are really low, but it's because if you miss, you fall over, and it's not good. So here I'll show you some. These are super old videos, by the way, if you couldn't tell. Yeah, so that's that. And then skill versus chance, trying to figure out like the right balance in your game of how much should your game be based on skill, how much should be based on chance. Anyone who's ever played chess against someone who's a lot better than them knows that's not that fun, because you will lose every time. Whereas if you play war with somebody, it's also not fun, because you're just flipping cards over. So finding the right balance between the two is good. All right, I'm not going to debate with you guys whether or not games are art, because they are. The purpose of art is to make people feel, but the problem is we get used to things way too quickly. That's just a truth about humans. So yeah, emotion is pretty much just the change in your mental state. This is why super rich people are sad all the time, because they're used to being rich. All right, so back to this 2D, 3D, 4D thing that I talked about earlier. So I'm gonna get all mathy on you guys. It's not really that complicated. Okay, so you see a pretty picture, you get like a peak in your emotional response, and then it tails off, because we're human and we get used to things. So if you look at it on a graph, that's what it would look like, right? So the lesson here is that it doesn't matter how pretty your game is, people are going to get used to seeing it and then stop playing it if it's not fun. All right. seeing a good movie. Same kind of idea, except you're seeing a bunch of pictures sequentially. So you end up with something that looks more like this, a bunch of peak responses. But you watch the movie again, all of those peaks are going to be smaller, which is why a lot of people don't watch movies more than once. So that's your lesson there. So when you're trying to design with this in mind, you got to remember that aesthetics will boost those peaks, but they won't keep them there. You need your mechanics to sustain long-term emotional response. So you play a game like Rocket League and you get better and better and better at it, your moments will keep having those peaks, because even though they're getting used to seeing the game, they're also getting better at it, so they're capable of doing more. So to me, there's kind of two different camps, although a lot of games would fall. It's more of a spectrum than two different camps, but you have sort of the integral camp, which is the area underneath your emotion curve, and you can kind of measure the success of your game based on, or the success of your design based on the area under that curve. It's kind of just your overall experience. People who play games for that, typically they like to play casual games. They like games that are just like experiential, like I'll get into an example next. And then you have people who prefer derivative games, which are, I don't mean that the games are derivative, I just mean that we're talking about the derivative of the curve. So the change in that value, those types of people are more adrenaline driven. They probably like horror movies. So yeah, people who will play ranked games and wait in the queue for like 20 minutes and are fine with it because they know once they get into that perfect game, they're gonna get the best spikes. So to contrast here, if you ever played Journey, it's really just like one continuous wave of aesthetics, and it's great, but it's also, nothing in it is gonna give you any of those spikes really. You're just kind of walking, which is fine. Some people are into that. And then you have games like Overwatch, which you spend a while waiting for people to set up at the beginning. There's some lulls in it if the whole team's dead or whatever. But then you have like your team fights and one-on-ones and things like that, and then you'll get a bunch of spikes in the game. And some people prefer to play games that have that appeal to them. All right, so we can talk about targeting specific emotions now. This is going to be kind of just rapid fire, just these 8. So if you want to create, if you're a mean person and you want people to feel guilty when they play your game, or grief or loss, the easiest way to do this is to create a feeling of attachment to a character in the game that you give them, and then allow them to fail to keep that character alive, which is mean, but also you need to think about if you have a save, like a load save system in your game. A lot of times people are just going to keep reloading until they can do it, because people hate negative emotions. They hate them. So here's a funny example. Any of you guys played Red Banner Saga? Nobody? One person. Yes. This is for you. There's one level where it's towards the beginning, I think. One of your barbarians is supposed to die like right off the bat, and he does it in battle. And I didn't know that, so I just kept reloading the game over and over because I thought I kept failing, and I eventually just gave up playing it because I couldn't get through the level without him dying. Apparently that was supposed to be part of the plot. There's other games like Heavy Rain, where if you do poorly in the game, it saves your progress and won't let you go back. So it's one of those games that has a whole bunch of alternate endings too, so it's important that they force you to fail at times. So yeah, that's guilt. Pride is really the opposite of this, and if you want to accomplish this, you want to make a game that involves building things or training pets. So like Minecraft is good at this. It's probably one of the reasons why it's super popular. Weakness, another one you shouldn't really go after if you want to sell your game. But a lot of games use this. Let me go backwards a second. So if you want these peak responses, so if you are making a derivative game and you want to make a higher peak in your game, another way of doing that is to lower the base of it. So if you're playing a game like, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood or Destiny 2, the very beginning of the game, a thing happens and suddenly you have no power. and they make you walk around with no power for like 10 minutes, and you're like, okay, I get it. I'm weak. I get it. Move on. So that's the contrast later when you have all this sweet gear and you can do all this cool stuff. So to contrast, mastery. RPGs and other games with persistent progression in them are good at this. They're especially good at it when you're dealing with someone who's not skilled at games, because it'll make them feel like they're skilled because they've been playing it for so long they have all the good stuff, even if they're not actually better at it at all. But if you really want this in your game, you should look at games like Rocket League and The Witness, where those games don't actually, well, okay, The Witness kind of saves your progress, but like Rocket League, all of your progression is in your own head. You just get better by playing it. Nothing actually persists in the game. And then The Witness is a series of puzzles that you don't know how to solve at first, and then you find like the most basic version of it, and you just do trial and error until you figure it out. And by the end of it, you know how to solve all the puzzles. So those types of games are really good at giving you a feeling of mastery. Anticipation. Make it known that something will happen and drag out the process. So if you've ever opened like a treasure chest in any Zelda game ever, they have an animation of him reaching in, and then it goes da 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 da, and then he holds it up. That's to make you be like, come on, what is it? Overwatch, loot boxes, same way. And then in MageQuit, I kind of designed most of the game based on anticipation. You're trying to anticipate where your opponents are going to be. Therefore, I added in like casting times to all the spells. So it takes like X amount of time for your spell to finally like trigger. So you have to guess by the time this is done winding up, where is it going to be? And it gives people a chance to like build up kind of that adrenaline before the shot goes off. So that could be a pretty powerful thing. Also, if any of you guys have played Diablo 3, sometimes you can get like a rare item and it doesn't tell you what it is. You have to actually go into your inventory and like pull the button down to open it. And that's just another example of anticipation. Longing. This one is more of, it's kind of the same as anticipation, but it's more like long-term anticipation. So if you've ever played like Mega Man, I don't remember which one it was, maybe all of them. At the beginning they show you like, they're like, hey, this other dude can do this really sweet thing, but you can't. And you're like, well, I want to be able to do that, so now I'm going to play the whole game so I can do that. In Wind Waker and Mario, they kind of do like the, here's your sister, or here's the princess, and now you can't have them, which is very frowned upon now, so don't actually do that. Okay. Camaraderie. Basically, the good way of doing this is you make a game that requires teamwork to accomplish a goal. A lot of times the best way to do this is give different characters slightly different abilities, so they need to rely on each other. So good examples of that are like Trine 2, there's 3 different classes that you can switch between. Each one can do a different thing, and you need all of them to be able to solve the puzzles. And then Rocket League is another good example of a game with camaraderie. Pretty much any game that you play where you high-five the person next to you is good at camaraderie. And then rivalry, this one's pretty obvious. Games like Smash Bros, you just pit people against each other and they go to town. All right, so I have how much time do I have? What time is it?
You've got about 10 performance.
Oh, really? That's it?
15.
Okay.
And then we'll
do this quick then.
Plug my computer in.
Who's played Metroid and some of the Metroid games? So aren't those games famous for giving you all of your abilities at the beginning and then stealing them away within minutes? Just brutal.
Yeah, actually, God of War 3 does the same thing.
Yeah,
Not the main.
Okay, I need 4 volunteers. Don't all volunteer at once. Alright.
I will crush you all.
Probably.
I'm not throwing this.
What if it comes back? It becomes boomerang.
Alright, so the point of this game is to show you guys kind of like what it looks like to start a game with just mechanics, and then slowly add layers to it to make it more enjoyable. It still will look pretty bad when it's done, so don't get too excited. Okay, I'm sure you guys all know this is Unity. Alright, cool. So, mechanics, they're basically Mario. Left and right, and then A to jump. You jump on someone else, they disappear. That is all. Did any of those stay lit? Nope. No. Alright, did you... Oh, there we go. Did everyone's... Whoever's won. Nice work. Nice work. Hang on, can we make sure everyone's controllers work real quick? Yeah. Cool. Does yours not work? David? Is it lit up?
No.
Can you push the Xbox button again?
Wait, can you climb the wall? Yes, you can.
Sorta, yeah. So there's an example. Hey, there we go. There's an example of emergence. That's not something that I really anticipated when I made it. All right.
You just sit up.
For the sake of time, I'm going to start introducing things to it. Hang on.
If they're on the wall and you jump up into them, do you die or do they? What happens?
You would die. Yep.
So you need something like slide down slowly or die if you're on the wall. It's a duel.
We're very sad. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So what did I add that time? Yeah, which is? Yeah, you guys got it. It's an aesthetic. I usually give this presentation to little kids, so if I sound condescending, it's because I'm just used to saying it. It's because I am. All right. I don't have those. Okay, I'm going to change another thing. This is the most careful players I've ever seen. Alright, so if you didn't figure it out, your colored side is your weak side. So what was that an example of? What did I change? Yes. Yeah. Alright, next thing is
You gave him physics 2D.
Whoa! I've never seen that. That was impressive. Okay. So what did I add that time? Juice. Yeah. Juice. All right. I'm gonna add another thing.
More juice.
Nope.
Oh.
Ooh.
It is still technically
Beautiful,
juice.
beautiful level design. Yes. Alright, so that was a stage that I added that's kind of mechanic and aesthetic. It makes it look a little bit better, but it changes how the game is played. Alright, so far, what is, if you're thinking of it on that curve that I drew earlier, what is the peak of that curve in this game? What's the most exciting part?
When you actually
get
when
someone.
you are
Yes.
very close to
So
getting
how do we make that peak higher?
Make it harder. Or make screenshots.
Yes.
Pollution. Slow down if you're about to maybe.
So that's, we'll get to that.
Slow down.
We'll get to that. Too early. What did you say? I heard someone say explosion. Someone said explosion. We're gonna. Okay, cool.
Always ready.
All right, so that. We're gonna give it that. Apply. Go. Okay. So yeah, that was an aesthetic. That was the point of that was to make the peak of that curve a little bit higher, to make it more enjoyable. And I heard more of an emotional response when that first person got exploded. So it seemed to have worked. Next, I'm gonna do what you said.
Fire?
No, the slow down. So if you think about that graph, it's actually kind of on your peaks. It's actually kind of cheating to mess with the x-axis by slowing down time. You're taking your peak and stretching it out.
Right.
So I'm gonna do that. All right, here we go. Wait, did I hit apply? I don't think I hit apply.
No, it just.
Oh, it slowed down. There we go. Okay, so that was the thing. All right. Okay, now we're gonna. I think I only have 3 left. Do you guys remember positive feedback?
So a score.
What?
I have a score.
No. So okay, so what happens? What happens is if you get a kill, all the other players become vulnerable on all sides for 3 seconds.
That's unbalanced.
That's the point. Did I turn it on? I didn't even turn it on. It's weird because normally when I add this, people are more aggressive because they want that first kill. 2, get him! Get him! You blew it. Alright. So, when I'm giving this presentation to schools, the kids find out very early on they can just flip their square over and sit there, and no one can get them. So, oddly, by the time I get to this point, the positive feedback actually fixes a problem with the game because it keeps people from turtling. Right. Because even if they turtle and someone else dies, they're still vulnerable. It's kind of interesting little tidbit there. All right, negative feedback is the opposite of what I just did. So if you get a kill, you become vulnerable on all sides. Seems fair, right? Come on, it's fair. All right.
Or did I just do that?
You guys should team up on 4. One of you kill the other person. Get him! Get 4! I've never seen anyone do that. Yay for emergence. Okay. Alright, this last one is information hiding. Pretty difficult to do with a game that everyone's looking at the same screen for. So, what it will do, since we're short on time, your controller will vibrate a certain number of times at the beginning, and that's your target. So if it vibrates 3 times, your target is 3. If you kill 3, everyone else dies.
Can you kill people other than you?
Yeah. Nice. All right, that's that game. So if I wanted to spend more time on it, I could turn it into this, where everyone's a turtle. And you just turtle each other. But don't turtle in the corner though. Like you like hit each other with your shell on the soft side. All right. So properly drawing inspiration. This is kind of short. If you guys have ever been to the subreddit Game Ideas, they're terrible. They're really bad. One of them that I saw was the guy was talking about he wanted Assassin's Creed mixed with Call of Duty. I'm like, you didn't. There's nothing to go on there. Like, what's different about it? So anyway, I don't need to explain why that's bad. But basically, when you're drawing inspiration, it's okay to borrow.
So running through a World War II battlefield without a gun?
You're that guy, aren't you?
No, we found it.
We found it.
Just following the path.
So anyway.
It sounds fun.
So pull inspiration from anything. You can pull them from games. It's okay to borrow mechanics that you enjoy of games that you've played. Just don't rip them off and don't rip off the art too. And definitely don't feel the need to only borrow from games. You can borrow from anything in life that you're interested in. Those make for the most unique games actually. But yeah, if you are pulling it from a game, make sure you analyze the game, figure out like what the mechanics are, what actually makes the game fun to play, and then theme it however you want. So for MageQuit, the base game, the core mechanic was based on an old Warcraft 3 mod that I used to play a lot with my brothers. But we didn't have that many computers, so we could really only play like 4 of us. And I remember thinking this would be so much cooler if it was with controllers and we're all looking at the same screen, and there were more spells. And that's kind of how MageQuit started. Another thing that game doesn't do very well is in between rounds you buy new spells, but you get more money based on how well you do. So there's positive feedback in between rounds, and the person who wins the first round usually ends up winning the whole game by a lot. So I took that, flipped it around. So also inspiration from Smash Bros, just kind of a brawler. The camera in the game is sort of inspired by Smash Bros, where it zooms in and out. And then there's a couple levels in the game that are based on Rocket League and Legend of Korra. But also Rocket League, I kind of just drew general inspiration from, just the idea of people being able to progress at the game by playing more and just becoming better at it. So trying to give the game like a high skill cap so that they can keep playing it. And that is it.
Okay, so questions. Let's take 10-15 minutes for questions.
Everybody got sweet neck pillow.
Amazon, $40. That's my mom's. I bought it for her. That's the only question. Cool.
That's the only thing.
Yeah.
What platforms, sort of services, or distribution makes quite available?
So right now it's only on Steam, but we want to bring it to all consoles. Not all of them, but the new ones. Yes.
What was the name of the Warcraft 3 mod?
Warlock. Yes.
You mentioned like targeting emotions.
Yes.
It seems like some games target a lot of emotions.
Yeah.
So is that, were you saying that generally target 1 or 2?
No, I was getting specific. You can target as many as you want, but it's good to identify what you're trying, like what kind of feelings you're trying to evoke in somebody. But really, everybody plays games for emotional response, whether or not they want to admit it. Yes.
How long did it take you to develop MageQuit?
Over 2 years now.
Okay.
Yeah, but Chad and I both have full-time jobs.
Right.
So it's just been like a passion project. Yeah.
So we've talked about this a little bit,
Yeah.
but for everyone, what is the future of MageQuit? What does it look like? What are you going to work on now in a few months?
Yeah. So right now we have our online multiplayer is in beta, and there's some bugs, but basically we're trying to iron out all of the online issues. Once we get done with that, I actually have a lot of plans for the game. Mostly I have 6 other elements besides the 4 that are in there. So by the time I'm done, I want to have 70 different spells, and then probably like 20 stages. Right now there's only 7. Yeah.
How many hundreds of hours are you going to dedicate to fixing all the bugs with all of those new elements?
That's actually not the problem. The spells themselves are not terribly buggy.
Well, you know the emergence.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's true.
You were talking about
the
boomerang had
the
those
boomerang, the
very
deflect,
special
yeah.
things.
So some of the spells, like deflect, that one was a huge pain to get it to work with everything else. But a lot. I mean, mostly if there's weird bugs, I kind of want that to exist because it's funny. Yes.
Have you decided on what sound or music to use for the input?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I had been trying to. Do you have a question? You've just been holding your hand up the whole time. I'll get you next. You don't have to keep your hand up. So basically, I was trying to find a good style for it, and I happened to listen to Hearthstone, like, you know, they have like those YouTube videos that are just super long. It's just like all of the tracks from like a game. So I listened to that, and their trailer music, I was like, this is exactly the sound I want. That was like the first track, and then the second track was like their tavern sounding music, and I'm like, this is perfect for the draft. So I like, I had some composers, they're called Fat Bard. They're based out of St. Louis. I sent them that YouTube video, and I said, this is what I want for the battle track, and this is what I want for the draft, like tracks 1 and 2. And I've had people be like, this sounds like Hearthstone, and I'd be like, nailed it. Yeah, so we had them do kind of like a dynamic.
Decide that you want a particular kind of play first. Second, when you had it in your mind, how did you come to your production? The right point to be able to have an MVP was good for your kind of players. Through questing, how did you manage to teach them how to play the game without having out pain in the butt? So the onboarding phase.
Yeah. Okay. So first question is, how do you choose your target audience? For me, that was easy. My target audience was me. And I know a lot of other people would want to play that. I actually didn't do much research into how well the game would do. I just wanted to make a game that I wanted to play, which I think is pretty common for a lot of people. But if you want to find a target audience, you should look at successful games and see. Actually, I can't recommend Steam Spy anymore because they're taking it down. But you used to be able to go and see how kind of theoretically how well games did, and then you can sort of see like for crossover genres, it's kind of difficult to determine because you're picking 2 genres that are completely separate. You don't know what the cross section will look like, but for a single genre, you can kind of find ones that do well. And then if there's some way to figure out how saturated that market is, like right now, don't make a battle royale game. Just don't do it. And 2 years ago, it was don't make a MOBA. Actually, that's still true. Don't do that either. And definitely don't make an MMO. Yeah. Your second question was, how did I decide when an MVP? Was that what it was? Yeah. When to call the game good enough for people to play? Is it?
I mean, right now you showed us some blocks. You know, just we can call it an MVP, a concept of game. Okay, that's all we need to play the game. When did you have something that people were able to try to have the feeling of your final game?
Yeah, pretty early. Actually, pretty early. So as I was saying earlier, the game started out as a cube with spheres on it. I actually played it with my brother right away just to test it and see if it was fun. And I had in my mind the spell curving mechanic at that point too. So I implemented that right off the bat just to see if it was any fun. It actually was, even with just circles. And then, yeah, and you saw some of those early screenshots where the wizards were not great looking. I was using 0 post-processing effects or anything. But yeah, I played it pretty quickly, probably after like a couple of weeks of development with my 2 brothers and then 2 of my cousins. But I'm a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to like showing things to the world. Like I've had so many abandoned projects because I just don't think they're good enough, which is also another reason I canceled Feisty Fist. But yeah, bringing it to the first convention that I took it to was hugely nerve-wracking for me. Like putting it out there and being like, hey, random people, here's the thing I made that you might not like. Does that answer your question? Oh yeah, that was the last one, yeah. So without a tutorial. I'm kind of lucky with this game because, what's up? Hidden tutorial, yeah, sure. That's kind of sort of what is built into MageQuit, because you do actually learn a spell one at a time before each round. And then there's a little video and a blurb saying what the spell does when you're picking it. So it's kind of a built-in tutorial, but like I said early, that screen was terrible. It used to be really bad. No one knew what was happening. And actually the best way to figure out how to make your game kind of seamless is to bring it to conventions and watch all of those people try to play it and take note of the things you keep saying over and over and over and be like, okay, that needs to be in the game somehow so I don't have to say it. So for me, that was it, was having, like, I got sick of it saying the same thing over and over again. So I didn't even have to take note. It was burned into my head that by the end of a 3-day convention. So yeah, basically that. Is that good? All right, cool. Any more questions? Yes?
One is your game only like you guys go and play together in person, or is there online matchup?
There is online multiplayer. Yeah, right now it's super beta. So yeah, right now you actually have to get on our Discord, and there's like instructions on how to switch the branch over, because I don't want people getting it and then being like, no one's online, bad review. I don't want that to happen. So shoot. Yeah, so there's online multiplayer. I think the best way to play it is locally with controllers all hooked up to one computer, but it's kind of a pain to do that. So so yeah, there is online multiplayer, and you can play multiple players on a single computer against other people online.
The second question I have is, as a game that's purely multiplayer, I'm assuming there's not a single player mode.
Not currently, no. I had ideas for it, but no.
From a marketing standpoint, launch the game, how do you have a strategy to maintain constant users? Because you don't want someone to, I download the game, run it, and there's no one there.
Right.
See the
So yes. So there's a few ways to do this, and I learned probably the best one at GDC. I attended a talk by the community manager of PUBG there, and basically because if you think about PUBG, that's exactly what PUBG is at a giant scale. Like, you can't have a game unless there's 100 concurrent people, and when they're done playing, they all drop off one at a time. So like, that's a huge problem. So what they did was, okay, so I guess I'll give you two short versions. One, make your game exclusive and make people feel like they are special because they can play it, they have it. Other people don't have it. Number two, AI, and pretend your AI is people. Those are your two ways. So yeah, the first one, what PUBG did was, when the game was like pre-alpha, super early, they would go to conventions and like hand out game keys like they were candy. And then they would partner with low to mid-tier streamers to get them to get more people to play the game, and they would give them just tons of keys for them to give out to their viewers. So you're like leveraging streamers in order to, like, for them to grow their brand, but you're also growing yours. And they had a giant underground community that existed before they actually even put their game into early access, which is why the game sold so well. Once it came out in early access, I think it hit 1 million sales in like 2 weeks or something like that. So it's basically, they had a giant underground community of people that felt like they were in an exclusive group of people that were playing this game that no one else could play. So those are the two ways.
One last brief is, like, what is your strategy to retain your users long term?
I don't have a very good one, but what it kind of is, assuming I can get these done fast enough, I have 6 more elements planned for the game. So full release, what that would look like is maybe a few more stages, fully functioning online multiplayer with matchmaking, hopefully very minimal bugs, hopefully no bugs at all. I don't think that's realistic though. And then I want to patch in a new element one at a time. So it'd be like, all right guys, electric is out now, and then everyone comes back to play more. And with each new element, you have that many more combinations of spells, which make the game more and more ridiculous each time. So yeah, that's my strategy. Also, we've talked to a few publishers about potentially bringing it to consoles, and if they could fund the development of the porting, that would be awesome, because I've been trying to port MageQuit to Xbox One and it is a giant pain. Yeah.
If you do get it on consoles, will you be trying to have
Crossplay?
yes.
Ideally. Depends how Photon works, I don't know.
Okay.
One more question.
Yeah, one question. Are you utilizing any gaming platforms to expedite your release? Like GameSparks as an example. I've used them quite a few times. You mentioned matchmaking, right?
Yes.
So I know it can be very difficult to try to create an algorithm that says, okay, on a scale of 1 to 5, what is your deviation of play to be able to match you against somebody else? Are you leveraging any of these third-party platforms to get you to market faster?
So, this is a fun question. So originally when I started doing it, so Photon actually does do that. They have, you can sort of pass in like, a SQL query, or you pass in like SQL parameters to say, this is the type of match I'm looking for, and that will include like difficulty level, like how good you are. The problem with Photon's matchmaking is that at the time, I think they actually have it now, but at the time, you couldn't have more than one player per client. So I wanted to have a similar matchmaking system to like what Rocket League has, where you can be like, you can have a friend over and be like, hey, grab a controller, we're gonna play this game. And then let's say you have 2 friends over and you go online and play like a 3v3 game. To me, that's the best way to play it. So I was like, that it's not okay to assume that everyone is only playing on one. So long story short, I started making my own, which is not a good idea, but I did it anyway. So I wrote it in Node. And started with Socket.io, and that was not reliable enough, so I switched to raw TCP sockets just for setting up the match. And then once it determines here's a match, it will. This is like a talk. This is like a whole talk in and of itself. It'll send like a generated GUID for your room name, and then let's say there's 6 people, all 6 of them will join that same Photon room at once, and then the match will start. I have not written any like match like the stuff you were talking about where you actually try to find matches. Right now it's party only, so you'll party up with a bunch of people and say, go. But yeah, eventually you'll just be able to join a queue, and then I'll have to implement all that logic. But no, I'm not using any third-party systems for that at this point. So.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Brett, thank you so much, not only for the lecture, but for putting in the risk to make this fantastic game. Big part of our community, individuals going out and creating those games, putting them out in the market, going to expos. That's going to grow our community, and you are a cornerstone of it. So thank you so much. Okay, let's take 10 minutes, do a little bit of networking, then we'll come back, Dreaming Door.
Yeah, guys, can you use this Summit 6? The mic?
Yeah, I stopped just 2 days. I just did. I'm gonna need those controllers back, by the way.
Oh, yeah, I managed to watch it when I was talking about
Yeah, we got the little higher. he's here to, yeah, who's played Dreaming, who's played a Golden Treasure game, right? Really cool game. It was first exhibited in gameplay form at the LTU anime convention several months ago. Who was at that? Yeah, very cool event. So anyway, yeah, Isaac is going to walk us through some gameplay and talk a little bit about the game. He is the lead engineer at Dreaming Door. Let's welcome him. Isaac, thank you.
Hello, yes, I am Isaac Sweet, the acting lead software developer and lead engineer for Golden Treasure, the Great Green. It's been in development for about a year, I believe. I've been working on it for 6 months. And this is, for those who do not know what this is a narrative open world game. So I like to call it an interactive storybook, but our boss, Ludwig, likes to call it a narrative open world game, where you're traveling an open world and just experiencing things as a dragon. So what I'm going to be doing today is, this is the first time that probably many of you will be seeing this, and I'm going to be doing a sort of best of experience. I'm going to be going towards some of the cooler things that you might see later without spoiling anything. But first I have to make sure that this lets me do that. It might not. Okay. So the reason I don't want to do this part of the game, which it is awesome, but I'm not going to do this part of the game, because some of you have already seen it. And if I just play through that part of the game, that's all you guys will see. It's decently long. And actually, I do believe some people have seen it before, so I actually want to get to parts of the game that other people don't generally get to see. So I am going to quickly steal a save file.
Or they don't know how to do this.
Look, they can know how to do this all they want. They can't do it because they don't have my save file. I will be releasing my save file for $50.
Could you just plug in this USB?
And also, because I had skipped it the first time, we can go and begin with a little bit of the intro. Sound coming through? I can't tell because they're pointed in that direction. Yeah. It was just very quiet. All right. So one of the things, this game has sort of ability pools that are the 4 elements. And as you play, your actions will be reflected in these elements, and as you grow in the elements, you'll get better at the game. Fire is kind of your passion. I believe the next one's going to be water, which is sort of your cunning and perceptive ability, perceptive even into the spirit. The next will be earth, and that's sort of your resilience, and also, I guess we like to call it like negation almost, this sort of stoicism, this inability to be changed by anything. And the final one is water, which is just pure sort of guile and intelligence. So I'm going to skip through these, even though they're really cool, because you guys can watch them all you want in your own gameplay. Which, important to know, it is freely available online right now. I do have cards with the link, but you can also just go to dreamingdoor.net/golden treasure demo/download. It's right there. It's also just right on the site. All right, so now it is my choice of how to spend the day, so I choose to show you some really cool stuff. The first thing I'm going to show you is exploring. So, like I said before,
Ben calls this a open world narrative game. And the reason is because, not just because there's a big open world, but because there's a bunch of stuff to do in the open world, where you get to make the choice of what to do next. Now, we haven't reached the point of being Dwarf Fortress where we randomly generate cool stuff to do, but because we're not doing that, we get to make the best personalized experience for the game. So you actually have concrete dialogue and a real story going on. So I'm going to explore this area. Every single place you explore is going to be accompanied by a little bit of text about what it is. For example, following the coldward bank of the running water, you pass through lush meadows and tall green grasses brimming with tiny beings. There are where two rivers become one, a deep pool calls for further exploration. You have heard of swimming, but have not yet tried it. Perhaps it is time. So, again, in this game you're playing a baby dragon. You've just hatched, and it's very important to be cognizant of your health. You gotta eat to survive, you gotta explore the world, but you also have to get out of here, because you're a baby dragon, and there are humans, the no-tails, and they are coming towards your den. And again, this will be much deeper expounded upon once you finally get to your own experience of the game, but I don't want to spoil how cool that is when you find it out. So we'll go to the place that I've newly explored. And we're going to take a look at this. So you're given these options, and they kind of dance before you as you look at them. And you get to choose. You almost have enough time for about half the things in the map if you kind of go hungry while doing it. Stay lean. There may be times where you see two options and you just decide I can't do them all. When you pick a choice, you're greeted with some amazing art. This is the core thrust of what makes this a open world narrative experience. You're finding these cool moments to just be in awe of. And then they don't just look pretty, they give you a choice and they give you a little bit of story. So I'm going to read through this one. Crawling outside your den in the cool of the evening to relieve yourself, you bear witness to 1,000 diminutive miracles. They're kind of tiny being, one of the many little armored tribes who live their lives in the undergrowth beneath the notice of the mightier beasts such as yourself. But these are special. They light up the closing dusk with a beautiful light beaming from their very bodies. Their spirits burn with such fervor that you can see their glowing souls, even with your eyes. Holding themselves in midair as steadily as they can, each beams forth its own radiance in a verdant symphony. Luckily, when you're playing the game, you just read it in your head, and you don't have to worry about pronunciation. Alone, each is a wonder, but together their grand dance of light sings forth a great music just on the edge of perception. We are the light which shines in the darkness. We are the moon and sun and stars. We've found the light within us and share it with all, without shame, without thought. We are the first guides of those who are lost. Seek the light within you, the hidden sun, and follow, follow. Dance as you will to drive back the darkness. Follow the light which shall bring the dawn. We are the messengers of the great above, come to remind you of your true self. You are the light, a spark passed on by those who came before. The nothingness should be made a lie, that the truth be ever translated into new and wondrous languages of flesh. So, as you take a look at the art, you are just generally greeted by fireflies. And we could just be like, yeah, there's a bunch of fireflies. But this isn't a game, this isn't just, you go outside, you see some trees, and you kill some animals. This is a game about transforming the way you experience things. And every moment, even the simple, are about these sort of deep reflections. The only time where there isn't so much text around it is the hunting, and even in the hunting, we sort of give you this feeling that you're not just, I gotta go kill a thing, but you are going and you are engaging in this very natural requirement of, we gotta eat to live. And you don't just stalk and hunt and kill, but you begin this dance of destruction where you get closer, you watch it, it watches you, you get a little closer, and then you finally eat it. And even though it dies, it was sort of a beautiful moment for everything involved, even it in its death. And so even in this, where the scene is you're looking at some fireflies, we wouldn't want to just say, you found a bunch of fireflies. Isn't that neat? We're going to go, hey, here's what they speak to you when you watch them, the feeling that washes over you.
They are very full of themselves.
They're very full of themselves and full of making you full of yourself, which is really cool. And then you get to react. Yeah, sure, let's eat it. You easily snap up the tiny thing, but quickly come to regret it. It seems that whatever magic allows them to shine their light also makes them taste extremely bitter. Now, there's a lot of really cool descriptions of everything you hunt and eat in this game. Most of them you will find here. When you hunt things, they display these really cool bits of information, and you get to learn about them as you hunt them, becoming more proficient in hunting them, but you also get a bit of feeling that you know the animal. I think all the taste descriptions were gained via the mouth of Ludwig himself. I don't know this for a fact, but he has the most amazing descriptions in saying how everything tastes, and it is quite possible he tasted them all himself. So one of the things you'll gain is these... They are great descriptions. These are really good. Yeah, they are really, really good descriptions. They're all beautiful. They make each animal, even in the taste of their flesh, feel unique. And this is just one of the many examples. You eat it and it tastes real bitter. It's got an acrid flavor and it foams lightly when you eat it. It doesn't go into too much description because you never want to eat such a being again. But it is there, and there's something really cool about that you get to sort of experience even the horrible taste of eating a lightning bug or a firefly.
Apparently the sickling is bitter.
I mean, maybe it isn't to me, but I'm not going to try it. But it is certainly to a dragon, and they don't want to eat them. So one of the things was we made that choice, and you saw those spheres pop up. Whenever you make a choice, it increases your mastery in those elements. It makes you better at them. Failure can also make you better at them, because failure is one of the greatest teachers we have. But simply acting and interacting with the world will give you these experiences which give you actual literal experience in one of the elements. So when you make your choices, they'll pop up to let you know, hey, you made a choice that affected one of your elements. And like I said, it's sort of based on not just a literal fire is fire, earth is earth, but we consumed a bug. So the game interpreted that as, or the writing has interpreted that with, you're kind of become more earthy and tasting something bitter. And also, you took this very passionate action of, I'll just eat it. I don't need to think about it, just bite it. That very embattled, passionate, I'll try it by just doing the thing as hard as possible. I'll take the action, I'll bite down on that firefly to see how it tastes. And then your recoil of, oh my gosh, that's bitter, but I'll suffer through the flavor to learn about it. And the game responds by giving you a little bit of fire and a little bit of earth. So the next thing I'm going to show you is the swimming that the dragon had noted about. So one of the cool things I like about this sequence is, we were given, every bit of art in the game is digitally hand-painted, with some of it being actually real-life oil hand-painted, but most of it's digitally hand-painted. And so every scene is unique and handcrafted, and then they're passed to us, me and my coworker Jacob over there. They're passed to us, and we get to create them in the game and bring them to life. So this is an underwater scene, and I got the privilege of saying, hey, I'll make that have cool, bubbly water effects. And then we've got a sound designer that gave us these really cool underwater, that nice gurgle that comes from the flow of the river, that bring it just from, you look at a painting to, that sounds like underwater, that muted sound, those gentle waves, that feeling of being underwater. Where the Heartbone Valley creeks meet, they form a river. The waterway looms deeper here. And among the shimmering green shadows, you can see the forms of water-bound prey. This is a realm which you have not yet experienced, but seems to call to you. Taking a deep breath, you slide under the water. Water, it seems, caresses your body more boldly than air, and you enjoy the sensation rushing over your feathers and scales, hunger slipping from your mind as you play in the water. You are fascinated by the watery essence of the scaly swimmers you meet, although they swim away from you quickly, humbly. Just as you're beginning to master moving in this new landscape, you suddenly stop short. There is something in the water before you. To other beings, it might seem no more than a clear shimmer, but to your dragged eyes, open to heat and essence as well as light, it is far more. Your core writhes briefly, excitedly, as you realize you have encountered a water spirit, a pure avatar of the sacred element. Its mind song prods gently at you, and you open yourself to it. No Drac would be so rude as to deny a messenger of one of the great four, at least in audience. So, another thing that we like to do is add just a touch of interactivity to every scene. As, of course, we develop the game more, we're going to want to put more of that little bit of flair, that little bit of juice, but it's, as you're reading, the game is almost reacting to your reading. And that's something that we've greatly enjoyed being able to do, and just sort of adding that touch every single step of the way, where every interaction gets a little bit, gives you a little bit of something. O new begun hatchling of sun and earth, hear now my testing song. I ran down a sunlit slope, singing gently as I went. A great stone rose up before me. What did I do? So this super adorable water spirit showed up and was like, hey, you know what I like to do? I like to give riddles. And also to teach through riddles. So he's presented us with a riddle. He was singing down a slope, and a great stone rose up against him. What did he do? Well, I don't know. What do you guys think he did? This little otter guy. Smashed it. All right, smashed it. Just like real water. Not so, I went around it, for I am water, and this secret is known to me. Nothing exists around which a way may not be found. Look always for the curving path the other way. If one's heart is pure and clear, one can dance around all things, as one finds the flow of the world, and obstacles become adventures. Let us play, let us sing together again. So when I complete this, it'll give me some mastery of water, and in this circumstance, we're actually being taught a lesson about the element of water, its flowing nature. So this spirit decided to show up and teach us something through a riddle. And that's just one of the magical things you get to do as a dragon in this game. So I'm going to go through this. We gain some water mastery. So I'm going to go explore an additional region, and then right after that, I'm sure that I will be quite starving as a little dragon. So we'll explore one more region, and then we shall go hunt. I'm a risk taker. I don't just eat when I have a slightly flashing health bar. I wait until the very bitter end of my hunger. Roaming further along the coldward bank of this part of the river brings you to a small lake. Charitable waters bring many good beasts to this area, making it an excellent hunting ground for certain types of prey. But there may be other lessons here for a young Drac with an open mind. So every action, exploring, hunting, and interacting with the world takes a day. Your character has been tasked to escape from these lands, but you can't just walk right out easily. At the bare minimum, you could just walk right out, but you might get hungry as you do so, as it takes days to travel across. So rather than just doing the bare minimum, you explore, you get better, you take in every bit of experience as you can from this world, and then finally you can leave. So I'm going to hunt There's several scents on the air, one familiar to this place, but few others. So I am going to follow the familiar scent of tree tail. So this is the stalking and hunting section of the game. This is the Dance of Destruction. I'm not going to read through it, but I can explain a little bit of what's going on. So the game has told us there's a tree tail right in front of us. If I take a look at it, I can see that they're not very fiery, so if I got into a fight with it, it probably wouldn't hurt me very much. It's also slower and less evasive than I am. So I'm decently good at hunting squirrels.
How can you tell that it's worse than fun?
So here are my stats. When I click on the squirrel, you can kind of compare. You see it has nothing there. And this is our sigil that represents our the knowledge that we've gained. And its complexity shows how much more in tune we are. So here's an example with the lesser element, it's just a circle, and ours, a little circle with a bit of an engraving in it. And the same thing goes for the air. You've got a wisp with a bit of engraving in it, and the squirrel's just got a little bit of a wisp. The more mastery you gain, the more intricate it becomes, and it's usually very easy to tell the difference between one and the other. Just going to draw closer to it. Get a little closer. He doesn't seem to be looking at me. I'll observe him just to make sure. So one of the things that you notice popping out is every time I observe them, I also learn about them. And part of this game is you saw that knowledge menu that displays everything you know about an animal. Well, you start with a very empty version of that. So let me show you an example. I think I don't know anything about... Oh, no, I know everything about pheasants. How about pheasants? Okay, so I don't know anything about them. I haven't encountered them once. I did steal my save, so I was like, I probably know something about things, but I don't remember which things I was hunting. So I don't know anything about these shimmerlings. But again, example with cats, or in this more apt example, squirrels, I have their fighting style down, so I know what they're going to do in combat. Those are just sort of like the bare elements of the sigils. If I'm doing well enough, we won't have to see combat. That would make this take a little longer than we need it to anyway. And then it gives us a quick little description of them, which I'll leave you guys to read on your own, because I'm going to hunt and eat this squirrel. There we go. I strike true and destroy it in an instant. This is another one of those examples. I don't know how Ludwig knows this.
he said that he could neither confirm nor deny that he's tasted everything. So,
you know, it's a little bit here, a little bit there. Well, yeah, a squirrel, but like maybe he hasn't eaten like a death adder. But he ate a regular snake. And he's like, you know, it's about the same, but this one's poisonous. So you can see that I've learned more about the way of the tree tails just by hunting it.
So can you describe that little bit of gameplay where is that reflexive? You need to hit it at the right time?
Yeah, that one is hitting it at the right time. Okay. The circles will come in and they will spin, and when they will quickly line up perfectly and turn red, and that's when I click to react.
Is there a threshold based on your experience and knowledge? Can you miss it by little ways, or do you have to be right on?
You kind of have to be right on. But it's generally not too hard to get that ambush attack. The skill that you gain over time is making it easier to get up to it and approach it. Because if I didn't have this amount of water, it would be extremely difficult to get close to it.
So if you get yourself into a really disadvantageous situation, you're fighting like humans right now or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, does it go super fast?
Well, it's that you might not even be able to approach it. It'll probably turn on you and attack you before you even get that close.
Is there a defensive minigame at that point?
No, it just it begins the dance of destruction, and you get to choose to run away for your life or give it a go and fight it.
Okay.
So actually, yeah, I can give a quick example of what that would look like. I can fight a squirrel. That's fine. I'll miss on purpose.
Yeah. What I was wondering was, what does the speed run of this game look like if you just have the best timing in the world?
Like, would it be this insane faster motion?
Could you go straight to the final boss? And just
Well, so it'd be very hard to do that because you'd starve if you didn't eat anything else.
We only need to eat one thing.
Plus, you do have your own abilities.
So yeah,
Yeah.
we can kind of talk about
So we can talk
that
about
a little bit.
Yeah, we can talk about combat a little bit. So there's an important thing in this where we have a before it was just these rote stats and rote abilities that were just like, fire will deal a lot of damage and wind will deal faster damage. And what we eventually went to is a rock paper scissors mechanic where there's 3 elements in a a combative circle. We've got fire besting air, air besting water, and water besting fire. And then you've got earth, which is this negation null element that is defensive against all of them, but also weak to all of them in the fact that since it can never be truly strong against them, it just sits there and takes it. So we've seen its attack pattern. We know it has an air attack and a water attack. So if I do a fire attack, let's see how do I strike. So there, it did water. I still killed it, but it beat me in that exchange. So it technically did damage to me instead of me just, I don't care, it's a squirrel, I'll just crush it. So knowing your opponent's very important. I should have thrown air, but I wanted to do that on purpose because I knew I'd probably lose. Rather than 50% chance of winning and 50% chance of nothing happening. That's way more boring. I chose the risky, cool option. But yeah, so all the elemental attacks have that sort of exchange with each other, and as you combat the animals, you'll learn about them to figure out which one's gonna, what it might throw.
Just trying to figure out the UI right now.
Yeah.
Is your health the color of the 3 gems?
Yes.
Dragon
And also the dragon UI itself starts to break down as you take damage. So it'll start becoming gray.
Now it's yellow.
Yeah, and then so the dragon itself was this nice, pristine, sparkling green, and now it's this dulled out, sort of like, you know, it got hit by a sander.
When you're completely full, how far does the bottom thing go?
Oh, so this can go all the way across, but that's just your energy. So that's you know, that's what keeps you needing to consume animals, because otherwise you'll just starve right out.
So you said most actions would take a full day.
Yeah.
So you killed one squirrel, you snuck up on it, you fought another squirrel. Did you just use 2 days or 1 day?
So hunting, when you go to a hunting ground, there's multiple things there, and you can, in these circumstances, hunt 3 times. And the reason we did that was because we didn't want animals to be granting extreme amounts of energy, and at the same time we didn't want everything to not cost any energy. So we just made it so you could do 3 hunts, which was a lot more risk and reward, where you could explore, choose an option you didn't know, and go, that was a bad idea. I'll just hunt the squirrels after that, because that's the, you know, the easy meal. And that also kept us from having to overinflate it, where like a squirrel was this amazing, super energy efficient snack. Or a waste of your time. We don't want it to be a waste of your time or too overpowered where the only thing you do is hunt 1 squirrel once and you don't need to eat for days.
So we've got this kind of day-by-day progression.
Yeah.
Does the game have a doom clock?
The game does indeed have a doom clock. So when we return to the layers, I'll just do that right now because I can. And I can point out, oh right, so while we were hunting, I learned about the way of the squirrels and I've now mastered the squirrels. I did cheat by taking my save over, but now I've become the master of the squirrels. One of the things is as you hunt, you gain their mastery, and when you've acquired maximum mastery, it saves that. And in all future gameplays, you are much closer to mastering them immediately. So you've already got all their attack pattern information, that quick description, And then this final bit of mastery gives you statistical bonuses in your elements. That way, you're kind of encouraged to quickly get that benefit and then hunt things you've never hunted before, experience new things you've never seen before. And like you were asking, because there's that doom clock, you kind of the game wants to focus you into saying, hey, maybe this time I'll hunt only squirrels, master them, and then in my next playthrough, I'll explore different things and eat only fish, and master those instead. So right in the top here, you can see those claw marks on the wall. That's how many days of in-game time has passed. So that right there is 9. There are a couple in the tutorial that I skipped, but those are always counted against you. But if you skip the tutorial, you also gain all the benefits that you would have gained by doing the tutorial, except for some really cool secrets. Hint, hint. There might be cool stuff you can only encounter even in the tutorial.
Do you have any of the achievements on this build?
I probably do. Let me take a look.
So yeah, one of the things that we have is by kind of exploring and taking some of the stranger or more risky options, you can collect tarot cards, which represent the sort of achievements in the game.
That's hidden right down there.
They carry over through playthroughs, and anytime you begin a new game, they also add stats to your character. So as you play more and on subsequent playthroughs, you'll find that your stats become better, and you may be able to take on challenges that you couldn't take on in previous runs.
Are they in order of the Greater Arcana, or?
We currently have. Well, so we currently have a few. We don't have all of them yet.
There's 21.
Yeah, they're 22. So currently.
I only know that number because I recently replayed Persona 5.
Yeah. So Isaac has 2 tarot cards here: the Fool and then Death. You win a prize if you can guess how you get death.
All right.
Tour of Sam's
That wasn't intentional. That's just what I chose because I really like those scenes.
Yeah.
All right. So you've come across a trio of lesser spirituals. They seem distracted by some kind of discussion. What do? You can actually fight things in this game as well, just on a whim. And so when you're talking about the hunting grounds, in a hunting ground, those are where the animals congregate. So sometimes you'll encounter an event in which you can also do combat. And most of the time you only fight one thing, or sometimes way too many things and you'll die forever. But in those circumstances, it's because it's a more controlled or different experience. So in this example, if I were to go attack them, they'd all fly away from me except for the one I attacked. So I'd be limited to that one hunt, and that would end my day. That'd be a little boring. So I'm going to watch what they do. You begin to catch shards of their conversation. And so we must proceed with the assumption that all things can be understood, given time and observation. The core elements of reality, earth, air, water, fire, are predictable and finite, and all things proceed from their motion. It cannot be denied that there is such a thing as expert knowledge, and that such knowledge has both value and merit. Thus, it is that the wisest of beings gather information. Disagreement, says another, slanting its head slightly to the left. The true nature of objects is clearly unknowable. The desires of the observer, as well as the limitations of its senses, ensure that no matter how much information is collected, the true nature of external creatures or even objects remains forever out of reach. The wisest observer attempts to understand themselves, and by having a greater control over their own cognition, can get closer to the truth than those who remain ignorant of their own psychology. The mark of wisdom is not information, but self-knowledge. Both of you, says the third, dipping its bill briefly in the water, are making the same mistake. You are assuming that thought objects have a true nature to begin with. The one song is empty of all meaning and even substance. It is not that truth is hidden by senses, but that it never existed to begin with. It is but a vain hope of limited beings. A wise being does not seek to accumulate a wealth of information, nor even to understand themselves, for none of these things can be said to matter or even exist. The one song is empty, and a truly wise being knows only one thing. They know nothing, and abandoning all need for understanding, simply lives free from all judgment. So just by listening to them, we've been granted more about the way of lesser spearbills, which means even in the future, if we were to just hunt them and find them out in the wild, we already know more about them just by listening to their conversation, something we wouldn't have gained if we just dove in and attacked them. In which, at that point, the only way to learn anything about them would be to actually eat them. But now we have that more permanent, we can gain a little bit more knowledge, and they're still around, so even if I wanted to eat them, I could learn even more about them. The wisdom of Drac is renowned. Let us ask the one hiding ineffectually nearby, one suggests. With subtle motions of their head, they turn their eyes and ears to you. What is the nature of wisdom? Is it based upon information, self-knowledge, or upon abandoning these things and simply living? So now, we've been asked... Yes, and we can still attack them. But we've been asked the question that they've been pondering, what is the root of wisdom? And like I said, we've gained that knowledge about them already, so we can either choose to interact with them and answer their question, possibly gain some knowledge of our own, or just attack them and learn more about what they taste like.
Can we vote on it?
Sure! We can vote on it.
Really fast though, Isaac, can you hover over the attack them option?
Yeah.
So what will happen there is you notice that the air gem comes up. This represents a kind of like stat check. It's seeing whether you have a high enough air to be quick enough to like charge them before they fly away.
You can see it's pulsing green.
It's pulsing yellow.
Oh. Oh! Oh, because there's two different things.
Hmm. We should change that.
But there is two different things, that's why.
So, if we see it pulse yellow like that, that means we're unsure of whether we'll succeed.
Green again.
Depending on, yeah. If it's green, we are sure that we will succeed, and if it's red, we're sure that we won't succeed. Even failing is not necessarily a poor option, because you learn by failing. You get better at what you're trying to do, mostly by failing in those attempts. Just wanted to point that out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I believe this
now
one actually has more than 2 outcomes. It has, I think, 3 outcomes, in which you can either succeed at charging them, or you get to them and they move out of the way. And then you don't get any, I believe you just don't get an ambush, but you get one anyway, and still fight it. And then there's also, you totally messed everything up. And they fly away from you. And they don't like
I
it.
won't attack them just because I'm angry that there's not an option of balance.
Well, so there is, wisdom is rooted in gaining of knowledge, so knowing is wisdom. Then there is self-awareness, so knowing oneself. There is, wisdom is accepting that life has no meaning whatsoever. And I don't know. That's the 4th option. I don't know. And then also, we could eat them. So yeah, let's take a vote.
So would you be okay with starting Q&A in about 5 minutes?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
We can probably just end this there.
Well, I was going to show like one more thing, but only one more thing. But yeah, let's do a vote. So who thinks we should say that wisdom is rooted in collecting knowledge? 1, 2, 3. Ah, yes. Yeah, well, you know, I wonder how many people are going to say attack them. I wonder how many philosophers are here and how many just hungry people are here. And if you are that hungry, there is pizza out there.
Right, maybe have some pizza before because there is a balance that is not allowed here.
All in favor of attack?
No more people. All in favor of wisdom is rooted in knowing yourself. Wow, yeah. Okay, there are some real philosophers in here. Wisdom is rooted in enjoying life and accepting that there isn't any value in life otherwise. And and confess that you do not know the true nature of wisdom. All right. So I think wisdom is rooted in the quest for self-awareness.
Sorry, eat them.
I know, eating them is a very, very favorable option.
You just have to download the game.
You respond that the wise are called so because they've looked within themselves and conquered their own judgment and biases. Indeed, seeking truth in external objects is useless, because seen through the filter of the mind, they are but reflections of the self. In contemplation and self-knowledge, one can grow closer to the truth. After all, is it not true that some have great knowledge but little wisdom? Facts cannot lead one to wisdom. Only clarity of the heart, the ability to perceive what is hidden, can grant it. The first and third spearbills seem unconvinced, but the second appreciates your answer, ruffling its feathers in excitement. Agreement, O hatchling of the Drac! May the blessing of water, realm of hidden things and perception, be upon you. As one, they launch into the sky, and you hear them continuing their argument as they journey onward. So it seems most of us are of the water element, at least when it comes to philosophy. Yes?
So are you able to go, like, spend another day and go back to that same scenario and change your answers and gain knowledge in a different element? Or
So there are some interactions that do let you do that,
okay.
and there are some interactions that don't. Okay. So when I went back to the map, some of the options that I had already selected were grayed out.
Gotcha.
Well, what's going to happen is a random event. A not random event. Yeah. All right, good fortune shines upon you this day. Nearby you find the silent form of an infant woods runner. It is unclear what destroyed it. It has no wounds upon its tender, juicy body. But its spirit is gone, its rhythm quieted forever. With neither chase nor dance of destruction, you have found yourself a tasty meal. And boy, am I hungry. So, what do you think we should do? Well, we can look at it. Let's take a look at it. Somewhat odd that it bears no marks of battle. And though it's a bit scrawny, it didn't die of hunger. Your keen senses detect some kind of swarm within it and around it. Beings even tinier than the buzzing armored tiny beings which share the earth with you. You decide to call them very tiny beings, as they cannot be seen at all with the eye, only smelled, and then only vaguely. The discovery causes a kind of disquiet within you, though you don't know why. Maybe because they're so indescriptible that you only call them very tiny beings.
It's a very tiny being.
It's a very tiny being, yeah. Well, I'm going to eat it. Because a little baby deer is worth quite a bit. And then I'm going to explore. There goes that super cool reveal animation. That's another thing. Before, it used to just be this sepia version of the map, and you click it, and it would just gain color, and that was it. And so a lot of what we've done besides really hammering down those mechanics is every time we have a mechanic, we say, how can we make that feel better? How do we make that feel more amazing? And that's just one of the examples of as you click it, it shines white, the clouds pass away, and then the events stamp themselves into existence with a nice little thud. All right, I'm going to speed run this next part.
Or you can sleep.
Hmm?
You can spend days.
No, I'm just gonna speed run it.
Oh.
I'm gonna speed run this beginning part because how you get in doesn't matter. So this, there's actually a blog post about this. I'm gonna rip it off. There we go. Oh no, I'm not strong enough to rip it off. Let's see. I'm gonna use my tail to pull the switch and get a little hurt while doing so. All right. So this is another feature of the game. You'll see everything's a little more of this ethereal, not as solidly drawn stuff. And that's because this is this sort of harder to perceive labyrinth, where you have this more open but also more vague and mysterious part of the game. And I'll speed run through this. You can read what this super cool, creepy purple texture is later. And I'm going to eat them. Because I'm speedrunning, obviously. Except for, I tried to eat it, but a horrible noise flooded my mind, stabbing white daggers, flooding my vision with a haze of blinding light, and I panic until I slam into the wall. Cool. All right. So this is the labyrinth, and this is a deeper, this is a part that feels a lot more like a dungeon crawling experience as well as a point-and-click adventure. There is a bit of a description in what it is, but this is more about experiencing it blind. But I am just going to show you me sort of meandering through it until I find something cool. But yeah, so this is a much deeper experience, and it actually warns you that you can spend days down here. Here, I'll just go there because that'll be an event. So one of the cool things is you can spend days down here, but you can also just encounter way more than one event per day. So there's an example of a quick event that I just encountered out of nowhere. And it's huge, sprawling labyrinth. And I didn't really want to show you all of it. I just wanted to show you that it's in the game and that there's a huge thing to explore in there that could take in-game days of your time.
Cool. Okay, ready for Q&A?
Yeah.
Excellent. Any questions?
Yeah, how did you handle the animations? Because you were given these kind of digital, painted
Yeah.
How do you handle animating it?
So one of the first things we do is we have the artists break down the images into layers that they want, sort of like a shadow box almost. So if you can imagine the image being this, shadow box where you've got the full background at the back and then a bit of it extracted and a bit more extracted in front of that. And so the first thing we do is we tend to sort of parallax it so you can kind of get that feel of movement rather than static. And then from beyond there, we look at the image itself and we also read the text and we kind of go with what feels correct. We add wind if there's wind. In the layer, there's a bit of a brush that moves in front of it being waved by wind. There's a little dust coming from the top. So it's those small things, those little bits of detail that we glean just from the descriptions of what it is. So, we start with the layered version of the image, and then we kind of go, it's up to our own discretion. Then we'll, show it to Ludwig, and he'll either okay it or he'll give us pointers and directions, just like the artists do with their commissions for the art. Yeah.
What's the size of your development team?
So there's 5 of us, and then there's gonna be 6 of us, I think, maybe 7.
Yeah, 6 people.
Yeah. But it sort of fluctuated. One of the things that Ludwig had done was he went and he sought out up-and-coming developers, so students, and he would go to the teachers and be like, hey, show me your coolest, your best, your brightest, and also let me see a bit of the portfolios of everyone you've got. And then he would create an internship. So he'd be like, yeah, you're good, let's do an internship. Or if it's just an artist that maybe he wants to see how they'll do, he'll do a commission and go from there. So it's actually a really cool experience watching him sort of just pick out people and be like, hey, I want to try something. Just give me your best shot. Sometimes we have art that just never makes it into the game, but, it's still cool to see. Yeah?
From this product that you're showing, how much, what's an estimated percent of, finish, I guess,
Completion?
from this?
So there is about 3/4 more worth of gameplay, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's 3/4 more worth of work. Now that does mean there's a bunch more art to be made, and a bunch more writing to be done, but mechanics-wise, it's actually fairly in its completed state, because the demo actually had a lot of the core mechanics that the final game would have, because it's just, the demo is in itself Act 1 of the game.
So at this point, it's kind of just more content on top of it.
Yeah, it's going to be stuff like we explore more content, seeing what we can do with what we have. Luckily you start as a baby and then become more grown up and therefore more complex. So that allows us to have baser experiences at the beginning, which we get to try out simple stuff and then explore with the more crazy stuff later, even though we have the same engine, without getting, obviously we're not going to do the super extreme crazy stuff where it suddenly becomes a 2D fighting game like Street Fighter, but we are going to be doing stuff where interactions will be more meaningful and deeper.
So Isaac, I actually meant to ask Brett of this as well, but I'll ask you, how can we as a community of game developers help you, help Dreaming Door, help this game?
Yeah.
Testers, feedback?
So one of the great things is, I have these cards up here that have a link to the site, And also, if you just go to dreamingdoor.net, the download's going to be right at the top. And when you beat the game, or simply when you click the credits screen from the beginning of the game, at the bottom of the credits, there's a survey. And one of the greatest things you can do is just directly tell us your opinions on the game from that survey.
Excellent, thank you. Any other questions?
I don't know if you mentioned this on the previous day, but what engine are you?
So this is Unity.
Oh.
Yeah, this is all done in Unity. I've just been coding the shaders through CG. So it's just Unity and, you know, simple, direct kind of graphics.
How do you guys control the text?
The text, so we use Text Mesh Pro's base just for the fonts and displaying the text, because they can kind of auto-size their text box for you and give like a width based on what's inputted. But we have an actually pretty complex input method that we've simplified for ourselves, but the way it parses it's pretty complex, where we use XML to create the scenes, and then the XML is parsed and turned into the text and options. And then, yeah, in the game, they get created as a prefab that we load the text into, and then since the prefab has height, because it uses Text Mesh Pro to generate that height, we can put that into like a sliding moving box. And I think this scene currently has 4 cameras. It had 5 before, but it's got 4. And one of those cameras is solely dedicated to the background, for example. And another one is solely dedicated to just the text. And what we actually do is use a clipping mask that can't be seen on any other camera, that when that text goes slightly too high, it just goes behind that box and gets cut off.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Is that for localization?
So we aren't focusing on localization right now because we would have to reinterpret the game on top of rewrite it. But because they're in XMLs, it's possible to do that using Unity asset packages. I wouldn't want to, but it is possible to do it. So no. It's not the kind of thing that's going to be easy to translate without like also rewriting it.
You would want like natural speakers. Would just be like, oh, well, I made.
And also like natural writers.
Yeah.
Like they'd have to also be co-authoring it in that language at that point.
One more question?
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead. The back?
Yeah. So you mean like how did we know when this game was at the point that we wanted, or that other people wanted?
No, I mean, how do you decide that what was the target for the commercial game?
Yeah.
How do you decide that you're going to make a game for a specific target instead of making a game that focuses on one like?
Right.
I suppose you could kind of target kind of game, right?
So. It's fine.
Built out was exactly what gamer was as close as possible, what gamer was expecting from this kind of game. Because we're seeing a kind of game that was, it's a very nice game. I mean, it's a long something people just play for a short amount of time. They have far more experience just thinking about the game. Games like Personal, it goes long.
Yeah.
You can relate to that. It goes in match 15 minutes. Stores going down because Clash Royale is faster.
Right.
Okay, it's 2 minutes game going better for that reason. So you are proposing right now very long executions. So you have to have in mind very clearly what you're trying to do. So how did you determine that?
So part of it, you know, I can only have. I think only Ludwig could really speak to that. But part of it, this is the experience that he wanted to make. Right. So part of this is something only the creator of the game, Ludwig, could really say. But this is something he's always wanted to make. And based on previous track record of similar projects like King of Dragon Pass, where they didn't have that big marketing push, but they did still get that sort of cult audience. So like not a lot of people know about it, but those who do know about it are the people looking for this kind of experience. So we know they exist. We know that there are people who want this. We just need to deliver that game to them. But also, we're not going to ignore a marketing push. We do know that there are plenty of people who, I don't have the market metrics for this, but there's a need for sort of just reading experiences on the phone, and we do want to target mobile platforms with this as a reading experience on top of being a game. So we're going to sort of cross-sell that as, yeah, it's an RPG, but also it's a reading experience, and people like that on the phone. It's got that art. But yeah, mainly we kind of have this, you know, we've seen other games try to do this and fail purely on a marketing standpoint, where they just didn't tell anyone that we had the game they wanted. Because we've seen a lot of really, you know, games similar to us, but they just failed in marketing. They just didn't tell anyone their game existed. And so that's sort of where we're going to come from, where we are going to have that marketing push. We're not just copying their Lightning, but then marketing it with a brand name, but we are going to say, hey, we saw that those games were going to come out. You did want them, but nobody told you they existed. Well, we got one, and it's fantastic. And that's our sort of direction.
All right. Isaac, thank you so much. Okay, so before we kind of disperse or get into networking, really quick, Brent, what can, I'll ask you the same question as Isaac, what can this community help you with, help MageQuit with? Play testing, or do you have cards, or? The game is out on Steam, I think it's 15 or 20? 10. 10? All right.
All right, that's a steal. Yeah,
so
hit it.
go look it up. Find it. Okay, does anyone have any community announcements? Anything they'd like to say?
Did you want to talk about what you were talking about earlier and decided to pass it off till later?
We'll talk about that.
Okay, in case anyone else has something.
Yes. Go ahead.
So there's going to be a special event in the first week of June. Is there still going to be this regular meeting here?
No. So Marshall? So Lawrence Tech, next meeting is going to be out at LTU in Southfield, June 4th, right?
4th, 5th.
4th, 5th? Awesome.
I'll send the link out to the meetup.
Is it going to be in the, well, where in New Orleans?
It's all in the meetup. It'll be in the Lear Auditorium. If you enter from 10 Mile, there's a big archway. Enter through the double doors. There are elevators up to it. We'll have some signage up, make it easier for people, but it's a confusing campus. So just make sure you enter from 10 Mile. Look for the double doors and then the archway. We'll have like a picture and video walkthrough.
There do tend to be like sign arrows that point to for every kind of event like this. So there'll be named arrows that tell you where to go.
Yeah, we'll make sure that there's something.
What's up?
What's special about the meeting next week?
So it is at a different location. It's not here at Sparky's. It's at LTU. And Unity is the big guest there.